Hmm. Hey everyone, we are just getting Diksha connected to this live before we start. Um, okay,
Hi.
well, let me just get the camera set. Wow, he's, he's still out of focus. I think I'll have to hold this. The stand's broken. Wow. Let's just wait for a couple of minutes and let people come, if anyone. Yup. Yeah, but I got your message last night and I was kind of I know I get what you're saying. I really want to read more of the book now.
I think we need to start doing more than one part at a time. Like this time, it took a lot for me to stop reading at part 3 and not start part 4. But I was really scared of just give.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. You have to say that again.
I'm saying this time was really difficult for me to keep it down and not start part 4 immediately after finishing part 3.
Oh yeah.
It's getting to that point where I can't keep it down now.
Yeah, and actually even okay, so I'll actually hold back because I'll actually just be starting off the discussion, so I don't want to get too much into it. But yeah, completely agreed on that. Completely. Do you want to just get started? I think we'll have people join. Right? Okay.
Yeah,
Hello
let's do it.
everyone, and welcome to the third session of a suitable discussion. Today we'll be discussing part 3 of a suitable boy. And unlike the first two parts, this was one where I was sleeping until 5 minutes ago. So Diksha and I haven't had our usual discussion call about the discussion. So this is going to be one where we rather wing this. So
Genuine and real and authentic.
yes. So I think I'll take the blame and kick this off. So I really I think the start of part 3 in itself is kind of sets the tone for part 3 at its uh, completeness, because it's very different from the first two parts beginning, and I really don't want to spoil this for people who are going to read this, but it is more or less kind of what you're going to expect from part 3 is very well encompassed in the first 3 pages of part 3.
Yeah.
And I mean, not exactly, but you do see like some elements of it. But without giving any spoilers, I think part 3, we can safely put this out there. Part 3 is largely about Lata and Kabir's blossoming love, right? And as we discussed in the previous two sessions, every part focuses on a person, and part 3 we're back to Lata again. And yeah, so one thing, I think for this one I'll get my, I don't know, flaw for the part, or like my objection to the part out right at the beginning. I think uh, the only thing that I kind of did not like about this part was how quickly things happened, right? I mean, you see, I don't know, it felt kind of off, wherein, you know, okay, ends up meeting Kabir a few times over this part, and there are these couple of times she's met him earlier. And he just reaches this third level of liking within a couple of meetings, which just feels very
Not real or believable, right?
yeah, I don't know, just
So what happens basically is Kabir is the guy in the library who we met in part 1 already. We knew something was going to happen, and Lata and Kabir initially meet very similar to the feelings that you had about their sort of first meeting, where Lata's not as into him, etc. But then towards when they meet initially, because she speaks to her friend and her friend sort of pushes her towards Kabir, suddenly it's like now she's all in love with Kabir, which to me made absolutely no sense. That just, I don't understand how that feeling went from 0 to 0.5 first, and then it went all in. very quickly.
Yeah.
But I can still buy the latter part. The first part, because she truly did not seem as into him. But when her friend Malti, in this case, spoke to her about him, she suddenly was interested and she wanted to know all this information about him and all about his cricket team and everything.
And something that was also a bit weird for me was the process with which she reconciles herself, right? So she meets the second time she meets Kabir is after an exam, and where she's supposedly distracted, and that's a very interesting bit for this part also, wherein there's apparently something that's just inexplicably distracting her during her exam. She has no idea what it is, and that thing comes up later very subtly as well, very randomly, and is a point that makes her sad. So I'm assuming there might be some, I don't know, major reason that we learn of it later. But anyway, she's done badly in an exam, and she's like sad about it outside her exam center, and that's where she meets Kabir. And subsequently, there's a part where she just kind of says that, oh, there was a stranger who cheered me up, and that makes her feel happy, and that is the spark that's leading her towards liking Kabir. And that just kind of put me off to the extent that, I mean, it's great that Kabir is a nice person and everything, but you don't really fall in love with every nice person or every nice stranger that you meet.
Or maybe you do.
I don't know.
Anyway, that
I mean,
aside.
yeah, it just kind of put. I mean, and exactly what everything you said about her equation with Malti and how that translated also into this. Like Malti's one who's pushing, and also we see the first uh, sparks of communal tension being put in here, like because this book is set like a few years after partition and independence. So you do see like Kabir, there's this very cliched thing where Malti calls up Lata and just tells him that oh, his last name is Durrani and your family won't really get approve of him and everything else. And again, I think that's also something that didn't really work lot for me, wherein so Lata's very quick to jump on the bandwagon to the extent that, oh, you know what, screw my family. Kabir is so valuable to me and everything, which just felt very off, like to the extent that, I mean, I'm all for love and everything. It just, you're sacrificing a family for someone you've just like met 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, and it just, there's not enough build up or not enough, and we have no information or no understanding of where the relationship is heading, where is it from. It's just a person you met a few times who sent butterflies in your stomach, hung out at a literary club meeting, and went boating with once. I mean,
Yeah. And I think at this point, also because we don't know Lata's character too well, what I was curious about knowing is Kabir going to be an actual love interest? And also to everyone who's watching, it's mostly because Siddharth and I have made sure to not read any spoilers. So we really don't know who the main character is going to be and so on.
yeah.
So I don't know if Kabir is going to be an actual main protagonist and the love interest for Lata, or is this just a way of showing Lata's character of being able to rebel against her family and her parents? So I don't know. So the chapter did nothing to make me want to root for Kabir and make me want to be this guy and like she should fight for him and this is the guy she's going to end up with. I'm just curious to know whether Kabir is the character to sort of show us Lata's character more of being able to rebel, etc., etc. So, the pace of the book made no sense, especially coming from part one and part two. Part two specifically was a very slow sort of chapter, right? And just like part three speaks about Lata and her first love, at least in the context of the book, part two did the same with Man, right? And the pace of that was extremely slow, where we were still getting to know so many characters, whereas this just seemed like a chapter out of a different book for me while reading it.
Right.
I enjoyed it, but it didn't sort of fit into everything we've been reading right now.
No, and like exactly what you mentioned, like contrasting it with part two is such a different exercise, because uh in purely, like, if you look at it very objectively as how many times Man and Saida Bai meet, or the kind of interactions they have, it's very different from what the kind of interactions Lata and Kabir are shown to have. Lata and Kabir are shown to have just these superficial conversations, right? Where they just talk about it, just informative talk, like, oh, this is what I like, this is, I mean, I know it kind of just appears to be like stuff on the surface, wherein there is this curious repertoire, and there's this constant tension between Saida Bai and Man's character, and there's just this build up over a couple of days. He leaves a message, and then very cheeky message at that, and then stuff like that. So, and still, it's a chapter which very you know at the end of it, it just very openly talks about how it's an infatuation rather than love and I don't know what. Wherein here Kabir and Lata are just shown to be in like madly in love and everything, and to the extent that Lata's like, "Screw my family, I'll be with you," which is I don't know. It
Exactly.
just didn't sit well with me. But another bit from this part that kind of was just peppering things for me was how the entire bit was there was another part that came out about the communal tension was about how Mahesh Kapoor is refusing to hold a Ramcharitramanas reading at his house because he's worried that the bill that he's passing is mostly going to affect Muslims, and by doing this, this would kind of create an image. And that's a very interesting take on how politics and communal harmony or hatred works, for that matter. That a lot of it is just about optics. It's not really about. I mean, we don't see any
What?
principled objection from Mahesh Kapoor's end about it, and I think that just translates till today in Indian politics, wherein your personal life or your certain actions on your part might not have any significance. It's just about the optics that you're kind of presenting to people. And I don't know if
Hmm.
it's just about uh, political optics to that extent, because we also see this situation where when okay, I don't know if this is a exact spoiler, but okay. So Mrs. Rupa Mehra eventually does find out about Kabir Durrani. Okay, so and she obviously finds out that he's Muslim, and you know there's this interlude when Lata calls her out and just tells her that, listen, you have Muslim friends, and she later on, when she's
Yeah.
thinking about it, she makes points out this line like, it's one thing to kind of socially mix with Muslims and another thing to marry them all together, and that kind of just reflects on how this optics translates back into personal life also, wherein you're kind of, if you're an upper class or like upper middle class person, you kind of are involved in the optics of having, like, say, friends from the Muslim community, right? Or I'm assuming for
True.
Muslims
Hmm.
from the Hindu community. But the moment it just kind of transcends that border of superficial interactions, it just becomes a huge problem for people to work out.
Right. And although for me, something that was really interesting is when, now that it's out there, yes, everyone gets to know about Kabir and Lata. Initially itself, the fact that Lata was seen with a boy was a problem in itself. And I quite liked that Mrs. Ruba Mehra's shock and just the fact that she did not like her daughter was hanging out with a boy and going on boat rides in the morning and so on, was everything happened before she got to know Kabir's name. So to me, that also seemed very authentic, where you would not like your daughter doing that. And the fact that his surname was the Durrani, etc., which comes out consequently in their conversation, is the moment when she completely sort of gives in and she just doesn't understand why her daughter is doing this to her. But I really like the fact that they did not make it necessarily just about what his last name was. And to me, that seemed very true to when the story sort of set in and so on. I think if that was something I liked about the book, about this chapter.
And so I also like so something that we, I think, discussed in the previous session was how Man and Saidabai's equation would be taken by people in general, right? And we have a very tiny callback to it in the part wherein there's this is subtly mentioned that, oh, okay, Said, their equation is just like the talk of the town, but it's nothing scandalous. Like, it's not pointed out by anyone else, or like, despite, like, three
And
women gossiping about things and
exactly.
everything. Right?
And it was so shocking because you have Man, who's this boy, who's also engaged. So it's not just the fact that he's involved with an elder woman who has the reputation that she has and is in the line of work that she's in, but also the fact that he is engaged to another girl, and that is still not as shocking. To the way that's sort of mentioned in the book is Mrs. Rupa Mehra and Man's mother and Man, whatever, like, I don't know, Veena's mother-in-law, I think, are having a chat, and that's just sort of a running thought in Man's mother's mind, but not, she doesn't hate that fact as much as Mrs. Rupa Mehra does about Lata just going out with a boy who's from her class. So that really speaks to you about the gender standards that existed back then.
True. And so again, I also just so now circling back to the things that I liked about this thing. So I think what I liked was how when Kabir and Lata went for their, I think, second. Wait, this was their first official, or not official,
Yeah.
unofficial date in that sense, right? When they go for that literary society meeting, and they had to sit through these poets and this thing. I think so. I think there was a very haunting call out in Amrita. There was this poem right at the beginning, right, which talks about how love haunts this person, and I think that just kind of sets the tone for this equation between Lata and Kabir, right? Even though it's not mentioned in then, and I think that's the beauty of this book, that a couple of setups of the book just translate like into the setup playing out 50 pages from then, not at that moment in itself. It's just mentioned in passing, and I think that beautifully came out during the end of the book, wherein yeah, end of the part, sorry, right. So yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's another bit that I actually kind of like. I don't want to talk about the end a lot because I know how that. I mean, I do you think that's a spoiler? I don't know. I'm not too sure if that kind of ruins
I
your.
think we should just, because we're discussing the part, we should just go into it. Spoiler
Okay,
warning,
so
drop off if you haven't read it till now.
yeah, please don't. Okay, so now that we've given adequate spoiler warning, right at the end of the part when Mrs. Rupa Mehra finds out, she goes hysterical, which is absolutely in line with what her character would do, or for that matter, any conservative Indian mom would do at that point of time. But she loses her this thing, and she, kind of, she just randomly comes up with this entire idea that she's just going to pack up and just leave Brahmpur and go to Calcutta to live with her eldest son and take Lata along, just as just to take her away from all of this. And there's this brief yet sad goodbye that Lata bids to Kabir, that she just tells him in a very typical Bollywood drama manner, "You should forget me" and everything. And he just goes away. The part ends with Lata and Mrs. Rupa Mehra moving to Calcutta. And yeah, so that was the callback I was talking about. Like when right at the beginning of the first date, this the literary society meeting they go to, the first poem talks about haunted love and how his unfulfilled, or his how this love is haunting him for a really long time, despite him being married for like these 50, 60 years. So yeah, I think that was a very interesting bit on the entire, I know, part that stood out for me. It's just like a very cute callback.
That's true. And also, I don't know if you noticed that whole Barsat Mahal sort of being at the background of their dates, because when we were going through part 2, which was about everything about Man, he also was going to Barsat Mahal where he was feeling a little unsure about his love, etc. And now Lata and Kabir's date is also set at the foreground of that. So to me, that made me feel like, okay, there is still a cohesive story. I'm still reading about this one place where different people happen to live. And I really liked how that was done, because it could so easily just be, okay, these people are somehow loosely connected, related, and that's why we're hearing about them. But the minute you said that context of the same place being visited for different reasons by different people, that gave a huge cohesiveness to the story, even though I'm reading it in break. Because I stopped reading right when Man's part got interesting, and now suddenly I stop again when Lada's part gets interesting. But they're joined by the city, right? And I really enjoyed that sort of literary almost tool that he seems to be using while sort of spinning the story together. So that was a part that I really enjoyed.
Right, and I think sorry, you were saying something?
Go on.
No,
I was
so
just
I
moving
think
on.
right. So what I think that entire Barsat Mahal bit was very interesting for me as well, because particularly because I think apart from Barsat Mahal, I don't think there was anything in this particular part that was I know rooting this part to Brahmpur. Like, so for any a reader who's
Exactly.
reading, it could just be set in any other city, but this somehow, I don't know, and I'm guessing this is something that'll just play a larger role subsequently. Not Barsat Mahal, but the fact that everything's tying back to Brahmpur. Why is the city coming into this vague importance? And right, and something something that I actually kind of appreciated was this the Tauji and Taiji character. How there's this Lata's friend Hema, who has this Taiji Tauji, who like is in charge of these 10, 12 kids who are studying in this university town. And again, it's just one of those things that just really move you. because I lived in another city for my undergrad years, and I know this entire idea of having this local guardian. A lot of people have this, like when you're studying in a different city, you're under the wardship of another. Especially in India, I know this is a very different thing out there in the Western world. But to everyone else who's studied in a different city in India, you know what I'm talking about. The idea of having a local guardian, where you have to, like if you're going out, you need to kind of um, like if you're going out for a long time, you need your local guardian's permission. They're your parents away from home. You once in a while, like begrudgingly go to their house to kind of just mark your presence in the city. But yeah, like the character really well, like was I don't know, it was a very brief character, but just kind of touched the right spots. And for everyone, I think that is exactly how local guardians would behave, I suppose.
That's
Yeah, it
true.
just felt like
I
a
think
very
for
nice
me,
Plari character to
that's true. I think for me, the funniest part of the book was, and now that we're like completely done with spoilers, you start off the third chapter with Pran getting a call about how Lata's run away,
right.
and
Right.
she has apparently run away with Man, and that to me, and then turns out that was an April Fool's joke and everything. But to me, that was just such smart writing, because anyone who opens this book thinks that what's going to happen, right? The minute we read part
Yeah.
one, where Lata found Man sort of cute, and part two with the holy scene, that's what you assume is going to happen. So it was such a
Right.
funny sort of call out to all the readers, going like, I'm not going to do this cliche nonsense, and this is not what's
Yeah.
happened, so don't. And I
Well,
felt like that was
I
such a
really
cool
loved
joke that the author and editor played on us.
I really love Mrs. Rupamera's reaction to the entire bit, where she just starts on this tirade like, "Oh, she ran away." That too with Man, like that is just that aggravating factor to her running away, not that she ran away, and that too in front of Man's brother, who's also like who also obviously knows that it's a prank, but just like quite nonchalant about it. Yeah, like he gets it why it would make it worse that she's running away with Man, right? And so yeah, that also kind of puts things in perspective, because that so it very subtly sent out the message to me that okay, Mrs. Rupa Mehra, while like this, because her character in the first two parts was shown to be someone who, while looking for a suitable boy for Lata in that sense, would value like a family's position or standing or culture, etc., before
True.
considering marrying her daughter off. But clearly there needs to be something beyond that also, because Pran and Man come from the same family. So
Yeah.
Pran was okay for her elder daughter and was like much beloved for her elder daughter. She was very happy about it. But somehow for Lata and Man is just like a big no-no in her head. So clearly there is
Yeah,
some, like, I don't know, evaluation beyond that generic, or he belongs to a good family, he's rich, etc., that the boy also needs to have
exactly.
some sort of
It
standing.
makes Mrs. Ruba Mehra's character not so superficial and a little endearing, where you understand that she really does want good people, not just suitable people for her daughter. So that I also like the
Yeah.
fact that, because so I mentioned this in the last two lives also, I feel like I'm losing a sense of time as to how much time has passed between two chapters and so on. This one, I think, tried to sort of reel us back into where we started with mentioning the 1st of April and the exams and so on, which made me understand what pace we're moving at. And there has been about 2 months or so, a month and a half, 2 months since Man and Saida Bai started happening, for the lack of a better word. So I really liked that also, because
Right.
uh, the prank, I think, played the most important part in making us realize where we've come from, how far along we are. And also because when you compare to part one, where Pran and Savita were getting married, right?
Right.
Now they're all settled in. Like, he makes jokes with his mother-in-law, and he already has a banter going out about Arun. And you know that there's something which is off between Pran and Arun, because he makes a dig at Arun. So, enough time has passed. These characters are now in a proper family. It's not someone new that's just entered. There isn't any more being cautious with each other and so on.
Right.
So for me, that this chapter did that very well, which the first two parts did.
So I'm curious about one thing, when I want your opinion on it, is that bit when, because this comes up twice very randomly, right? When Lata just trips off and is thinking about something abstract which she doesn't know herself what's distracting her, but something is, to the extent that she's unable to write her paper properly, or it just, and
Right.
it's also something that saddens her, because it's something that happens during a very happy moment with Kabir, where she just drifts off and starts thinking about something. She knows it's the same thing that was distracting her, but she doesn't know what exactly it is. So I don't know, it just
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a hint at something or just like, something Vikram Seth just asking you, like, okay, just kind of remember this. This might play a role later on, or it's just one of those eccentricities about Lata's character that's going to be pervasive throughout the
Exactly.
book, right?
So this
I know.
is actually this is a question as a reader, like, right? Okay, what do you prefer knowing? Me, when I'm reading a book, I really like knowing who the character is initially, and then when something like this happens, I feel good when I know whether this is an eccentric behavior of Lata's or whether this is happening because something is going
Right.
to it's going to develop into in the future. And I don't know that with this book, and it's happened multiple times, right? Even with Man's chapter, that kept on happening. So for
Right.
me, I'm not feeling as invested in the book because I feel like I still don't know the characters. And it could have a lot to do with the fact that the length of the book is extremely huge. We're still like on part 3 and there are multiple parts and it's just long and winding. It could just be that.
Yeah.
But somehow I am still not like completely understanding each character, and each chapter makes you know a little more about that
Right.
core, which I'm not liking too much. Like, I wish that they were established by now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think till now the most I know about is Mrs. Rupa Mehra and Lata, right? And that's just because they've gotten like the most like time in the book, like even from all narratives, like in toto. I think they just
Yeah.
spent more time, even from a third person's perspective, analyzing their characters, right? Like even in Man's part, there were mentions of Mrs. Rupa Mehra and Lata, being there, but not as much in the others. So yeah,
That's true.
and another thing that I took, I don't know, kind of a bit of beef with was, okay, so the book is set in the 1950s, and it's a very specific weird thing to take beef with, but I did was how they for this I'll just again a slight spoiler in that sense. At some point when Lata's trying to find out about Kabir, she finds out that he's a really good cricketer, and okay, not a really good cricketer, he's a good cricketer, and she reads an article which describes how once this guy ran like 4 runs between the wickets, which kind of, that's the bit I had a beef with, because so if you've been a fan of cricket, you kind of realize that the evolution of cricket, how the evolution of cricket flows, and to understand that back in the 50s, anyone running 3 runs between the wicket was a super huge deal. Like cricket used to be supremely slow. Okay. So like someone running with 4 runs between the wicket has to be like a something that is the stuff of legends at that point of time. Like let me just putting it out there that the Indian World Cup in 1983 was where we had to where we defended a total of 183 in 60 overs. So I'm just putting this kind of dampened me. I'm like, nahi yaar, this wouldn't have happened. This would have been a much bigger deal that Kabir managed to run 4 runs between the wickets. But yeah,
It
that's the
could just
only.
mean he was playing against incompetent people.
No, that's my point exactly. Like it mentioned that there were a couple of reasons which added towards the ease with which he was running between the wickets, or why he was able to run 4 runs. But no, like even with the most incompetent crowd or like incompetent fielders, it's not possible. Like, or if it is, it's going to be a much bigger deal, and you won't be finding out about it from an obscure, like, I don't know, magazine article. It's something which becomes a talk of the town. Like it's like Tendulkar scoring 200 runs. It's not that even if you're not a fan of cricket, you just kind of feel it becomes that kind of stuff. So that's my weird, odd, specific beef from this part.
Oh,
But
speaking of odd specific things that stood out for me, and this is one of my, like, I think it was a really cute but like cute part in the book. And again, I hate sounding like an Anuja Chauhan fanboy, but here's what it is. There's this one scene when they first meet, and when they're at that literary meet, and Kabir's running a little late, and then he sees Lata, and Lata smiles, and then Kabir sort of moves back and sort of alludes to the fact that her smile is so bright and he had to sort of shield his eyes. And that's a constant theme of Battle for Vitora. Like, constantly, that's what you know about the character. That's the cute joke between the lead and the love interest and so on. So this to me, like, really took it back. Right? And I have never read this kind of an exchange in any books but these two. So that again, sort of oddly specific thing that was extremely cute, but also really took me back again to an Anuja Chauhan book.
And I think that's what, like in retrospect, I think that's what endears us to Anuja Chauhan, or for that matter, to this kind of writing wherever we see it. Because I think it's not that this happens all the time, but you can definitely imagine this being happening. Like I know for a fact that if I'm, I don't know, enamored by a girl, and like 1 out of 10 times, I might end up actually just pulling this cheesy stunt. Like it's something that
Everything
might
possible.
happen. Yeah, but all, like to that extent, all of us know or have been in situations where this has either been pulled on us or has been pulled by us, right? And it just kind of feels nice to just read about it, and in exactly the way that I think we've lost Diksha's connection. I'll just hold on for a second. Sorry everyone, I think Diksha's line is not processing. I'll just wait. Oh, she's disconnected. I'll just wait for her to join back. I'll just scroll through the comments in the meantime. Not you guys are amazed. Thanks, Namrata. Thanks, MD Patan. I think this is taking a bit longer than needed. Let me just. So, do you have a book that's the discovery of India? Yes, I do have that book. That's a very odd question, but thank you. I do have that book with me. And I recently recommended it as a book that you should read if you're looking to read about India, because I think Jawaharlal Nehru spent so just a fun fact, he spent about 10 years of his life in jail during the freedom struggle. And he wrote a lot the book during his time in jail, and he was a known scholar, someone who spent an insane amount of time researching and working on learning about his own country. And he wrote a discovery of India just to kind of give more perspective on that. So I guess if you have the book, you should really read it, or like probably get it for yourself as well. Let me just text her. Right. Yeah, I'll take that time to kind of just give you a little bit of a more, actually try and get some feedback out of you guys, although there are just three of you watching. But yeah, this goes up on IGTV as well. That's why. So, I know how you've been liking what the discussions that we've been holding till now. Uh, we've roughly covered about 200 pages of the book, which is not a lot, about 15% of the book. But yeah, we've been loving the book so far. I hope all of you have been. And I think this is something I hope to address like subsequently at the end of this book, wherein when you're reading something as major a classic as Vikram says, a suitable boy, right? Oh, okay, Diksha's back. I'll just complete this when she's on. Right. Okay. Hi, Diksha. Sorry. Homopoetic, can you hear us now? Please just send in a thumbs up or something if you can. Sorry. Okay, so I was just going on a. I'll just complete the chain of thought that I was having. I was not discussing the book, it was something I was talking about, was about how I was just asking people for their feedback on the book as of now, if they've read any bits of it. Because something that I personally feel when I'm reading uh, a classic, right, or a major book, something like as a suitable boy, is this pressure to kind of appreciate it, right? Which at least about 4 5 years ago I did, like when I was still a relatively novice reader. That, oh, I have to, this book is so popular, so famous, so I have to like bits of this book. And
True.
yeah, let me just put this out there for everyone. Please don't feel pressurized to like the book. You can absolutely hate the book as well. There are, as we keep on mentioning in every part, there are bits that we don't like about how the book's written. And sometimes it's just like an objective thing, a subjective thing that you don't like, that you just didn't agree with how things are playing out. Or it could be an objective thing where you're just not appreciative of the writing style. That's completely fine. I think that's just something I wanted to put out there to kind of uh at put people at ease with. Right. Do you remember what you were talking about? I mean, we were just wrapping up, but the end of what you were mentioning, I think.
No. So, just another point. I don't know if we covered it, but speaking back about the time
Mm-hmm.
frame where the book is set in and so on, this time we also are sort of told more about what people do aside from being involved in their love stories, which is they went for a movie, all of them, and there was this
Right.
whole Didar versus Halchal, what movie should they watch kind of a
Right.
entire. Again, I really like because it spoke more about the families, etc. Now the families are no more those very complicated family trees at the start of the chapter,
Right.
but they are actually people who interact and have, go out on like different outings and build their relationship and so on. So that is something that I really enjoyed that small bit, which didn't really add to the story in any way, but sort of added to the characters.
Right. And that just really reminds me of this anecdote that I kind of wanted to focus on, was about how Mrs. Rupa Mehra's father is like super emotional about the movie that he's watching, and it's about like friends who kind of get back together after having a misunderstanding, which is somewhat what he's had with Mahesh Kapoor, I guess. That is just something hinting at what's
Seems
going to
like
come. So, yeah, seems like it. But the other bit was where Mrs. Rupa Mehra talks about how, or at least thinks about how, her father's marriage to someone who's half his age, is just like a cakewalk compared to what her daughter's proposing, which is the weird bit for me, right? Which is, or like kind of reflects that hypocritical standards you see in society, to that extent that, okay, you have, ideally, I don't know, or it's maybe a personal standard wherein uh, like a 70-year-old marrying a 35-year-old is somehow deemed acceptable by people, or like people would not create a huge hue and cry over it. But like two like well matched adults in that sense falling in love is going to be a huge
yeah.
problem because of their religious differences. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, it's just, that's just one of those. It's not really a very profound observation. It's just like kind of saddening one. But yeah, that was something that caught my eye.
True. And just to wrap it off, a very subtle difference, but I could see the difference sort of in Lata's age and Man's age,
Right.
or I don't know if it's age or just because of the genders that they are the main protagonists are, but the way both the parts were written, I think, were very different in terms of just how they meet their love interests, how willing they are to pursue them. So there is a case to be made that Kabir did sort of follow Lata almost everywhere, right? But it was nowhere as bold or nowhere as relentless as what Man did with Saida Bai. So
Right.
I think just the difference in like the age of the characters or the maturity or like gender, whatever it is, that seems to really get highlighted, especially when you're reading part 2 and 3 back to back.
Right.
So very small point there. And I think it was really subtle, which I really enjoyed.
Right. Okay, so I think on that note, we should end this discussion here. Do tune in for the next episode discussion that's happening next Sunday. We'll be doing part 4, and I think we'll have to discuss if we can do part 5 as well together. Uh, we'll have to just figure out our time-based situation whether we can do it or not. But we'll be announcing it soon. So do stay tuned and just DM us your feedback if you have any. And happy reading. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hope all of you loved that episode. If you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel and our podcast. Please tell us how you like this podcast through the comment section below. We'll be back with another amazing episode of the Kitabi Karwan podcast. Thank you for listening.